Welcome back. If you remember our talk about testing, I mentioned that React has these two special features that you often see in their tests. One is the enzyme library, which allows us to render our components in a test environment, which we saw. And then we can use whatever expect methods that we want from Jest to actually test whatever is rendered. But there's also another thing called the snapshot testing. And again, this is another really good tool that comes with Jest that really helps us test our React components. So let's talk about that in this video. If we go back to our app, you might be asking yourself, all right, I can keep going with this card component and just use the regular Jest syntax to make sure that the card component has everything that I need, including maybe an image tag, a div tag, some names and emails. But here's the thing. We worked really hard to keep these components what we call stateless components. They are not using the class syntax to extend React component. They don't have any state. They're just pure functions that we've created. So if we're actually writing tests, I bet we're going to repeat a lot of code here. We're always going to just be testing if this got rendered, if this got rendered. And that's a lot of repeated work for a developer. Well, Jest realized that this would be a lot of redundant, wasted time. Wouldn't it be great if we can just take a snapshot of whatever this card component renders, and anytime while we're writing our card component, anything changes and the component doesn't look as we expected it to, as the snapshot that we took a picture of, well, if it looks any different, then we failed the test. That's what snapshot testing is. And it's really easy. Let me demonstrate and you'll see how simple it is. Let's go back to our card test here. Instead of doing the length to equal 1 and many other tests that we can write here, let's do something different here. I'm going to write expect. We're going to shallow card. And since we're not using render and mount here, let's just remove that from our imports. Now, we've rendered the card component. In Jest, we can use snapshot testing to say to match snapshot. That's it. So what does this do? Well, let's save here and see what just happened. We have a snapshot summary that showed up. It says one snapshot written in one test suite. And we see that it passed. That's good. But one thing you may have noticed is that we now have a folder, a snapshot folder that magically appeared just by running this method. If I open this up, I see that Jest took a snapshot. And you can read up more about it here, but it looks like a text file, a plain text file that has all these things. You see the shallow wrapper object here that has of length 1. It has the class name that we have in our div. If I keep scrolling down, we see that we have a ton of information, such as the type of div. We also have a type of P, a paragraph. Now, what does this actually mean? This took a picture of this component when we shallow rendered it, so that now I can keep saving. Let's say I'm working on my app, working on the card component, and I keep saving, but I decide to remove this text center tachyons class that it has. I'm going to change that and save that. Now my tests fail. And it says one snapshot test failed because we've just changed what the snapshot expected the card component to render. How cool is that? Magically detects any changes, and if, let's say, a developer comes in and messes up our card component, the test will immediately fail. We see that expect to render card component is failing. That's very, very cool, and it even tells you where the changes have been made. This is the same with, let's say, we're by mistake not rendering our P component, our email of the robot. If I save this, we see that we're missing a few things. Very cool. Now, let's go back to having the email here. Let's save it. Okay, everything is passing. But let's say that, well, I actually do now want the text to be centered. This was intentional. I did want to move the class name and make a change to it. Well, with snapshot testing, if I save this, we see that we have press W to show more. I'm going to press the W key. And here, we see that we have the option of pressing U to update the failing snapshots. If I press U here, it's going to take another snapshot, and it's going to say, yes, I made this intentionally, take another snapshot and use that as the reference. So I'm going to say U, and there you go. My snapshot is now updated. And if I go back to the way I had it before, it's not going to fail because it's expecting a different snapshot. The snapshot was just updated in here. Now, how simple is that? It's very, very nice. And as a matter of fact, because we've made this card component so simple, it's just a function, a pure function that takes an input and always produces the same output. By just using the snapshot testing, we don't really need to test anymore. We're testing exactly what it needs to do, which is make sure that the card component renders whatever we tell it to render. And that's the beauty of snapshot testing and creating these small stateless components. We can have really, really nice tests that are one-liners to just run a snapshot test, and we've pretty much covered our bases for the card. Now, one thing I haven't shown you, and let me go back to updating our snapshot here. I'm going to press U, is code coverage. How do we know that the map snapshot or the to-match snapshot is actually fully testing the card component? Well, I can run npm test space coverage, and it's going to show me a coverage report. And let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see. Look at that. We have absolutely zero tests other than perhaps the setup test.js, but that's because we're not doing anything in that file. So there's not much to test there. But if we look at card component, even though all the other components have just 0% test coverage, card component now has 100% code coverage. How cool is that? One simple line, and we've covered our bases with the card component. Again, I'm going to keep saying this throughout these videos, but writing tests shouldn't be complicated. Try to structure your application in a way that writing tests are really, really simple. And the way you do that is by writing these pure functions that keep things simple, and you don't have these massive functions that do a ton of things that become harder and harder to test with more lines of code. All right, that's it for now. Let's keep writing some more tests in the next video. Bye-bye.